So we have a new parament here. It says faith in action. And that's our definition of stewardship. Today's gospel lesson comes from Luke 21, and its final verse, verse 19, says this: "By your endurance, you will gain your souls." This comes in the middle of a brief discourse about signs of end times, another of those troubling and menacing lists of calamities, natural disasters, and persecutions that await the faithful just prior to the coming of the Son of Man in power and glory. Jesus names those things that will strike humanity: wars and insurrections, earthquakes, famines, and plagues, and the faithful being arrested and persecuted, handed over to synagogues and prisons. "Do not be terrified," counsels Jesus, "for he will put confounding words into the mouths of those on trial and guarantees them that not a hair of their heads will perish." It sounds as though getting through these threatening events with your faith intact constitutes endurance. And again, your endurance will gain your souls. In his emphasis on endurance, Luke sounds an awful lot like James in his brief New Testament letter. While tradition credits this James to be Jesus' brother James, scholars insist that this is unlikely. James is believed to have died either in the year 62 or 67, and yet Origen, the early church scholar out of Alexandria, makes the very first mention we have, his first quote of James's letter, and this did not take place until the early 200s. It wasn't for another 150 years after that, approximately, in the late 300s, that it became better known, James's letter, and even quoted in the Western Church. Even at this late time, recall, the Bible as we know it still had not come into existence. The author of this letter, James's letter, addresses it to the 12 tribes in the dispersion, which is hopelessly broad as the salutations go, and could not possibly have been sent out as addressed. Most likely, the author presents what he has to say in the form of a letter, and it's clear that he continues to value the law, in a sense, as Judaism previously did, and as Paul rejects. One of my Bible sources says this about James's letter: "What we can be sure of is that James's focus on the importance of down-to-earth, everyday behavior would have been especially relevant to those who saw themselves as of little account. Those, particularly women, who were engulfed by domestic responsibilities would have been reassured that any service they might give to God was far from irrelevant or worthless. In other words, for those who folded the gospel message into their lives as something practical, and even as a hands-on approach to living a good life, James provides reassurances and positive feedback that their lives of faith in action will pay big dividends. Like Luke in today's lesson, James wastes little time in highlighting endurance as a valuable quality to nurture. He writes, "And let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing." A few verses later, he will add about anyone who endures, that such a one will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. Our faith lives are not defined by a kind of one-and-done approach. Instead, as with stewardship, we are asked to endure because such service never ceases but continues, and may arguably even frame the course of our whole lives. Famously, and in contradiction to what Paul tends to teach, James writes, "So faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead." Before he writes this, however, he prepares his readers for this bombshell by encouraging them and us to be doers of the word and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. Whoever James was seems to have been well versed in Jesus' teachings, for these words sound very much like Jesus, or are even taken directly from his teachings. It's stewardship season again, and the stewardship committee has come up with this as something of a motto or a message for this year. Stewardship is faith in action. I like this a lot, and I bring James to the table to join us, in a manner of speaking, to make connections between stewardship and discipleship, and between actions and works and good deeds. Stewardship remains more than the collection of offerings, although without these, much of the rest of a church's work and purpose might be moot. Luke celebrates the contributions of others in providing for Jesus' ministry. He writes of the women who followed Jesus and the 12, including Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out, and Joanna, the wife of Herod's steward Chuza, and Susanna, and many others who provided for them out of their resources. To provide for ministry out of your resources may stand for the most familiar way in which we talk about stewardship. Indeed, calls to stewardship can feel like calls for financial contributions, and in large part, they are. As such, when people think of stewardship, perhaps, they think primarily about opening the checkbook and engaging in the act of writing out a check. And of course, this is true also. However, the real value of doing such an act as this far exceeds the act of putting pen to checkbook. I consider, for example, last year's Christmas giving tree. Yes, in order to have a giving tree requires many of you to contribute, to open the checkbook and write checks. On the other hand, it's a mistake to believe that your act, your exercise of faith through action, ended with putting down your pen and removing the check from its book. In fact, many of you went shopping for the young people at our church, and you brought back or ordered online the things those children put down on wish lists. Still, even then, your stewardship, your exercise of faith through action, did not end there either. On the Sunday before Christmas, you also got to witness the young people of our community open the gifts you provided with joy and excitement and relief and gratitude. Many of them will remember this particular Christmas for years to come, and perhaps for their whole lives, and will feel nostalgia for an event in which they felt loved and cared and provided for, because you chose to exercise your faith through action, giving to people in need as our annual celebration of Jesus' birth approached. And still, it would remain a mistake to believe that your stewardship as faith in action ended even here. In fact, certainly, your kindness, generosity, and your understanding of the gospel and stewardship as faith in action contributed even more through the example it set to these same young people. In giving to them out of the goodness of your heart, you give also to the developing goodness of their hearts as well, by planting seeds of love in them. The people of this community of faith, although few, behave as though they are many more in number. Surely this comes from a place of faith. We are not a rich community. We are few and small, and yet we do great things. How is this possible? Because you do not shy away from giving. It's almost a joke in our larger culture, the idea that churches ask for money. Some people, sometimes glibly, sometimes cynically, will make fun of, mock, and deride passing around the plate. And yet that's exactly how, in part, you accomplish what you do. Nancy shares with the congregation regularly how other groups and other churches bigger than us exhibit surprise, even disbelief, when she tells the people she meets with in discussing refugee matters all that this church does. For goodness sake, as few as we are, we strive to care for an entire family and hope to change the trajectory of their life from a world of threat and fear to a world of hope and possibility. The entire matter, of course, is out of our hands, strictly speaking. And yet, if we succeed, it will be entirely because of all of you, because of your concern, your love, your contributions, and your prayers. This is stewardship because it is precisely your faith in action. In this unusual book of the Bible, James sets out to define a practical and true and pure approach to religion, or to faith, or to living a good life of discipleship, however you prefer to think of it. He writes succinctly, "Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world." Reference to orphans and widows is simply shorthand for the least among us, for the truly vulnerable. Remember, back in those days, a mother without help had only prostitution to turn to if she wished to feed herself and her children. James states the case clearly and simply. It would be hard, try it. It would be hard to make his point more plainly and in fewer words while still remaining so deeply rooted in the grounds of biblical teaching. Probably every church would benefit from putting those words inside and outside their buildings as a reminder of what they are to be about. So yes, it's stewardship season again, and again you will be asked to pledge, and again you will be asked to help with the different ministries of this community. Already, many of you are involved in other ways as well. Well, for some of you, frankly, it gets harder with age and the infirmity that age brings with it. I'm not sure we appreciate all the ways we engage in inspired ministry. From giving folks meaning services to celebrate their lives when they depart, and feeding their families and friends, to contributing to food banks, to helping each other get to appointments, to simply reaching out with cards and calls to remind folks that they matter. And when is this good work ever finished? It isn't, of course. And so God's prophets remind us to endure, both for the service you give and for the crown that awaits. As disciples, we are asked by God to be stewards of our own lives. What will we make of this one life God gives? To live humbly in service to others honors and praises and worships the God who gave us being. It's still the best way to still the best use to put your life to. To serve any other human being, and especially those in need or in distress, may be the purest form of worship and the most effective way of serving God. If you love God, then, Jesus teaches, you will demonstrate it. You will prove it by loving your neighbor. And we love our neighbors and our God through stewardship, which is varied and manifold and nothing less than faith in action. Amen. Amen. Our next hymn, O God of Love, O God of Peace, is number 571.